Your company today this week actually went to the FDA and asked for emergency authorization for antibody treatment. Now, my understanding is you have two treatments out there that you've been working on, a single antibody treatment and a dual antibody treatment. What did you ask the FDA for, and explain to us why now was the time to make that request?
Yeah, thanks for having me on. And today's a big day. There were a number of points we announced today. The first, as you're pointing out, is that we've submitted a request for an emergency use authorization for the single antibody therapy, where we announced the data a few weeks ago and then disclosed more of that today. And we did that because we think there is evidence that the medicine is safe, and that particularly in high-risk individuals, those that are older and have suffer from obesity, that there is a significant impact not only on symptoms, not only on knocking back the viral load, but also on hospitalization events. And we know too many of our senior citizens and those in high-risk groups are going to the hospital with COVID-19. So we submitted this today. We also announced combination data on that very same antibody plus another one, which appears to work in a pretty similar way, perhaps slightly better in some ways. The problem is we started making the single antibody earlier, so we have a lot more quantity this fall, and we want to put that to work rather than have it sit on the shelf. We think it can help people, and we'd like to have to ask the FDA to release it so we could help more people.
Dave, talk about that quantity, talk about manufacturing, talk about distribution for us. How easy is it going to get it out to the masses? How much harder is it to produce in significant quantity versus a vaccine, for example?
Yeah, it's a challenging space. Amongst the kinds of things we make for medicines in general, monoclonal antibodies are some of the more complex, difficult, and expensive. So although they're, in this case, behaving very well and safe and could be used in a lot of people, the constraint will be supply. And you mentioned a number of companies at the top who are working on this. We hope they all succeed because we need all the supply we can get. Unfortunately, there's many, many more patients than probably doses we could supply. The key will be to engage the whole of the system, and we've collaborated with Amgen, for instance, to use some of their capacity, Regeneron with Roche. That's great. Drug companies teaming up to bring more to the fight, and then use the lowest doses possible that can still be successful so that we can spread that volume over more patients who are suffering. One big advantage of the monotherapy we're submitting today is it's a relatively low dose, 700 milligrams. We studied up to 7 grams. There was no difference. And so we're confident that that lower dose could go a long way. And today we said we could treat up to 1 million people this fall based on the production. We started really back in the springtime at risk in several of our factories.
Where are you thinking then on pricing, and are you in talks with Operation Warp Speed?
Yeah, so it's a great question. We've been in talks with Operation Warp Speed, all the government agencies here in the U.S. and in other countries for some time. We're not in a position to announce pricing today, but what I can say is we are following certain principles. The first, and maybe most important, is that patients should pay almost nothing or nothing. I think that's a real benefit of working with the federal government here in the U.S. and other foreign governments, so that they can really make this not a hurdle for patients, their financial means. Secondly, is we believe that the price point should offer shared value. So we're not seeking to capture all the value, that as we demonstrate today, that you'll have less hospitalization costs. That will be shared with the hospital systems and the government, and will produce value in the system immediately. That's a goal we have in setting the price. And then finally, we're going to price by ability to pay around the world, not by selling it to the highest bidder. So we'll allocate quantity based on where the disease is, and then set a price in tiers based on the wealth of the country. So US, Europe, Japan, those countries will ask to pay the same amount, a higher amount, which will help recoup some of our costs in R&D and so forth. And then lower income countries will pay less. The poorest countries, we hope to have a philanthropic approach where we basically give away our IP and seek partners to make it very cheaply. Look for some announcements coming up on that.
All right. So, Dave, there are some questions here about the longer-term efficacy of these types of antibody treatments, not necessarily Lilly's, but just broadly speaking here, and that once we start to administer these types of treatments to a much broader population, that over time it could lose its effectiveness. What do we know about the science behind that argument right now?
Well, that is always a concern in virology, is so-called viral escape. this is a benefit of our combination approach and why we looked at both a monoclonal antibody, which can knock back the virus, does it very successfully, and then also a combination. Because we do know there are what we call resistant variants out there in the wild, which our antibody can't reduce the load on. And we see those patients in placebo and on active arm in our monotherapy study, and they look like placebo. They're no worse for having gotten the drug, but they don't necessarily benefit from the drug. With the combination, I think we demonstrated they do benefit from the drug. So we want to get to a combination eventually for everyone. And our combination, I think like some of our competitors, fit together like two pieces of a puzzle. They cover all the possibilities for mutation escape on the spike protein, the main target we target on the coronavirus. And so there wouldn't theoretically be a possibility for viral escape with the combination. The challenge is the volume needed is a bit higher to produce that, and the study's slightly more complex to run. So we had the mono first. We'll follow with combination to avoid that challenge. And then I will also say we are testing to really make sure that that's true as we look at patients who have recovered already themselves in the so-called polyclonal response. We all make thousands of antibodies after we've been sick to make sure those antibodies neutralize any variants of concern.
Just 30 seconds left here, Dave. I just want to quickly ask on manufacturing deals. You talk about the deal with Amgen. Will we expect any further news there?
Well, we're working with them hand in hand right now to scale up their facility. They're a major biotechnology powerhouse like we are, and together we'll bring a lot of volume to this. Still, we need the appropriate patients to have this used on. It's not going to be for everyone. We want the highest risk, and we want to use the lowest dose as possible. That's it. We don't have any other news today on that, but we expect their volume to come online in 21.